Leftover lasagna.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna? No way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by
my
Nitin
church
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagna, the unserious podcast that is recording its 38th episode on a day when our inbox is full of junk mail. That's right. This is a podcast that conducts all its operations indoor. This is a podcast that will steer clear of the Sindh Uru at a time when Catholics wait with bated breath outside the sin door of the confessional, purifying themselves in anticipation of the next pope. This is a podcast that wonders whether they will be saying Pekavi, I have sinned. I am Tony, the marketer who brings words to a sword fight. And joining me is the bigger man, and not just because he's farther from the equator. The man who answers the question, does size matter? With, oh, size. I thought you said spice. Wait, I have both. The man on whom you would want to roll a dice, the man who finishes last because he's nice, the man who makes people say, my Myers big personality type is INTO, into Nitin Sundar. Say hi.
My rubrics only. Hello, Tony. Yeah, unfortunately, war, no laughing matter. By the way, jung is exactly how a Malayali would pronounce junk. So, jung email,
Which is opposite, no? Because
which is opposite. But yeah, we are recording on Wednesday, 7th May. Last night is when India started their strikes. Non-escalatory activity over non-militarized assets in Pakistan.
Yeah, I think the freedom of speech also gives you the ability to not have an opinion on something, right? So we started by referencing this, but also I think modern warfare is a theater where projections and perceptions matter more than reality, right? And in a very good way. So what I'm saying is, please bring on the mock drills. This is one time when I'm willing to embrace steel plates and bang them for good measure, right? As long as we can all bang steel plates and thumb chess and go home without it
Yeah,
escalating too much, I think it is
exactly.
okay.
But
Yeah,
to completely shift topics and take this elsewhere, because why not? No, since you
tell me.
mentioned the beauty of the freedom of expression is that you can choose to not have an opinion. This
Yeah.
is also what days after the elections happened in Australia, and we found
Oh,
out from our friends in Australia it is compulsory to cast your vote in Australia,
correct.
and if you do
Yeah.
not, you need to pay an administrative charge of 20 Australian dollars, and if you don't, you could actually be hauled up in court. And last time this happened, people were actually made to go to court and explain why they didn't show up at the polling booths to cast their vote. I find this pretty cool. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think there needs to be a minimum number of votes for them to actually make sense. No, this is why leftover lasagna is compulsory viewing for all our family members because otherwise they will suspect that we are a
Yeah,
bot uploading random content onto YouTube and
yeah.
podcasts and then leave it out.
See, the corollary to making voting compulsory is that it is also very easy to vote, right? And there were photos doing the rounds of people in swimsuits and bikinis straight out of the beach, because that's what Australians do, who have come to the
Hmm.
polling booth. They're casting their votes in their swimwear and probably heading straight back to the beach. Which reminded me of the one time I voted when I was in Chennai in 2006. I think I got my voter ID. I'd just become of voting age, and I participated in the elections with great fervor, and I cast a vote for this party called Lok Paritran, which you might remember.
Paritran.
Lok Paritran, yeah, it was the small people-led party, which was
Okay.
kind of a precursor to Anna Hazare and Kejriwal, and Third Front, a people-led Third Front, or something of that sort that emerged
Amazing.
during those elections. So the next time I wanted to vote, I was not in Madras. I think I was in Bangalore, and I found out that my voter ID, which I had from Chennai, was of no use, and I'll have to jump through several hoops to get it transferred to Karnataka and then cast my vote there, which I of
Hmm.
course did not do. Which is in stark contrast to Australia, where you can show up in
Yeah.
swimwear, it cast your vote, and go right off.
I was worried we'll lose the segue actually, but you've nicely brought it back. Both
Yeah.
war and voting is where the performative element is more relevant than actually the effect of it, right?
The only difference is one of them is a middle finger and the other one involves the forefinger.
Index finger. Yeah. Today we are slightly changing tack, just so you know, Nitin Sudhir.
Yeah, please.
Is by looking at some of the things that are objectively not true, but we still kind of use, right? I think the first one we kind of gave hints in the intro. This is the Mercator projection, right?
Yeah.
What is the Mercator projection?
Yes, you brought this topic to the table. Literally, okay. So the Mercator projection is basically what we see the world map on a flat surface is actually a stretched out, a strangely distorted version of the globe, which is
Yeah,
the actual shape of the planet that we live on. The only way, since we perceive a lot of our information on pages, on flat surfaces, on paper, the only way to bring the globe to the table is by flattening it out in the form of a rectangle shaped map. And in order to depict the planet on a flat rectangle shaped piece of paper, there are certain distortions that you need to apply, which makes the certain parts of the world which are much smaller than they actually are seem much larger, and vice versa, right? So
correct.
I think places in closer to the poles look far bigger than they actually are, whereas places closer to the equator are closer to the actual dimensions that you would expect.
Have you seen the West Wing?
I've seen a few episodes. I don't remember much, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I haven't seen it, but apparently there's one full episode called "The True Size of Africa" or something, right? Which is
Okay.
about the Mercator projection, as it were. So why this was useful was because this was made in times when navigation was a thing, right? Which means like ships had to sail from place to place, and they needed to actually consult maps, and therefore, while the distortion was there, it was also useful to sort of navigate the seas, as it were, right? Issue that happens is that conveniently countries that are farther from the equator are also the ones from the western world slash developed world, right? And countries or continents like Africa, South America, even parts of Asia are represented much smaller than they actually are. I
Hmm.
think this might be one of the reasons why Trump is very gung ho about taking over Greenland, right? Because it looks fucking huge on the map. On the Mercator projection, it looks like Greenland and Africa are the same size, right?
Yeah.
Whereas actually Africa is 14 times larger than
Oh,
Greenland, right? Like,
I had no idea it was 14 times. That's crazy. Yeah.
exactly, right? In the last century or so, there was a movement to stop using the Mercator map, right? Because obviously the time of seas or navigation through seas had ended. But basically, when web maps came in, like Google Maps, etc., you had to sort of rely on this particular projection. So
Oh.
the internet is a thing that has brought back what is called the web mercator or Google web mercator, etc. Right?
Actually, I don't know, and I'm positing that I don't think your assumptions about why the Mercator maps should have disappeared and why they
Hmm.
continue to remain. I don't
Yeah.
think it is true, because people still out in the sea do need to navigate, and they still need the advantage of using maps. Right? What are the alternatives? The alternative, of course, you have GPS and all of that, but
Yeah. Yeah, there are other projections, right? Like,
oh,
okay, and I think the first major problem is that the only true map is will be the size of the world itself, right? And therefore everything that you take is going to be an approximation, right? So there are other projections. I think the one that sort of preserves the relative size of continents and countries is called the Gall Peters projection, right? So this is what the Mercator projection looks like, right? And
correct.
obviously you can see how huge Greenland is, how huge Antarctica is, whereas actually relatively they are much smaller, right?
Funnily, Greenland
And
is the only non-green thing in the entire map, but yeah,
this is true.
just white.
Iceland is green, Greenland is ice. But
Love
this
it.
is the first time you're hearing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is the Robinson one, which is the compromise, which does that partially spherical thing, right?
but this is a compromise. Yeah, you're right. It's neither here nor there.
Huh, correct. Good thing we are an
Oh,
audio
I like that
podcast.
map where there is a lady who's walking. What
Yeah.
is this? Ghost map.
This is Gall Peters, right? And
Ah,
obviously, it seems very galling or very weird to the eye because this has actually preserved the shape of the land masses, right? And this is not something you're used to because since I'm guessing third standard geography, you've always seen only one map, which has always been the Mercator projection. So
Correct.
the Gall-Peters one is a cylindrical world map projection, and it
Hmm.
retains the accuracy in terms of landmass size and all of that. So there are other things, right? But the point is
Yeah.
that by the time they introduced it, maps became insignificant because you started using flights, etc. They became more relevant when web
No,
maps
maps are
came
never
to
going
be.
to be insignificant, right? So you spoke about the navigational requirements
Yeah,
of
yeah.
maps, right?
Hmm.
And again, when you talk about flights, also it's a navigational use case. But the
Yeah.
requirement to have to this looks nice. Sinu Molvate. I love this. This is, yeah, this makes a lot more sense because it's like a peeled orange, right? Which is how you would expect the map to be, except that
Right.
continents are looking sideways at this. But
Hmm.
there are other needs for maps, right? The need to depict distances and places to in a
Yeah.
manner that can be processed in a meaningful way by the human brain.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
fundamentally what a map does, right? So, and
Yeah.
you are always going to have to continue to resort to one of the flat maps, even in the world
Yeah.
of Google Maps that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Technically, you're using GPS, right? You're not using the map per se to navigate, but you still need the visual cues when you're driving to know where you're going, which is why you continue to use some form of flattened out map because it is something you can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
But
don't think they were ever going to go away, and I don't think they will ever go away either.
yeah,
But they are
that's
wrong. Yeah,
fine. But
not that
yeah,
agree.
they're
Yes.
wrong. And also, if you were to look at distances, right, you would never look at a map and think of something like the polar route, right? Which is basically, uh, instead of flying east to west, you can actually just fly over the poles, right?
Which everybody knows, and that's how they fly. So it's fine.
Yeah, so but how are you depicting it on a map, right? The point is that if you have digital resources, you can obviously look at it as a sphere instead of looking at it as a flat pack map in that sense, right? But I think the larger thing that we're talking about is therefore there are certain biases that creep in
Yes.
because the sizes are depicted the way it is, right?
Yes.
And this is where we sort of ask the question: does size matter? And the answer very clearly is yes, right? Because you look up to things that are bigger by
Yeah.
default, and therefore, like Africa seems trivial in comparison to the actual size, and like countries like let's say UK or France, which are like
Hmm.
tiny chotu motu countries, also cultural forces once used to be, but you feel
Yeah.
like they are much larger than they actually are. I think that is the nub of what we're getting to.
Very good. Yeah. The Europeans and the developed nations continue to pull the wool over our eyes, is what you're claiming. But yeah, and I think there is a modicum of truth to that assertion when it comes to maps.
what a what a choice of word.
मोदी कुछ कम नहीं किया, बहुत ज्यादा किया है over the last 24 hours. But हाँ.
Yeah, and I think okay, I think this is important because this applies to everything, right? I think it is in Malcolm Gladwell's Blink how he spoke about the average height of the CEO in the US, right?
Mm.
And I think on as a population, less than 5% or 3% of or something of men are 6 foot 2. But
Mm.
if you look at the population of CEOs, more than 30% of them are at least 6'2", right?
Yeah.
Because you sort of have this halo effect, which comes with size, obviously, right? So the bigger things look, the more powerful they seem, etc., etc., right? So on and so forth. Which means that over years, if you're teaching culture, history, etc., etc., the map becomes a significant part of what you learn and internalize, right? And
Mm.
therefore, the relative importance that you give to countries, etc., is probably what I'm
Correct.
looking at.
Fair enough. Yeah. Back in seventh standard geography, you had to be able to mark the rivers Narmada and Tapti correctly
Correct.
on the India map. And if you don't mark them at the exact point, you don't get the marks for them. And imagine if suddenly, some kind of enlightenment happened and they launched these better maps and said, okay, from now on, you guys have so far been learning using Mercator maps, the TTK maps, which is what we used to use.
It is
That
available in
was,
Anna Nagar. World itself is available in Anna Nagar.
yeah.
That way. Well done.
Yeah, and imagine suddenly one day if they start using these, stretched out maps that are more accurate, but suddenly your Narmada and Tapti are actually not even flowing through the middle of India, but they're flowing somewhere in Sri Lanka or straight into the ocean. You're not going to get any marks. So, yeah, as always, my heart only goes out to the kids who are forced to memorize useless stuff and reproduce them. Imagine if their frame of reference only changed. Yeah.
We continue to use this, right, as like the most major map in the world.
Of
uh,
course.
and and also this I mean my sort of favorite subjects in MBA in term 1 were microeconomics and OB1, right, which actually speaks to a lot of the biases that we have, right. And this is one, right. The other is something called swimmer's body illusion. I
Hmm.
think at least growing up, several of us were told, I don't know about you, but we were told, if you want to get tall, you should play basketball. Right?
Yeah. You jump and you become taller.
Yeah, you start jumping, therefore you'll become taller. It is a classic way in which causality is reversed, right? Like
Yeah.
what Michael Crichton, I think, called wet roads cause rain phenomenon. Right?
Correct.
You
Correct. Yeah.
invert the causality. So
Correct.
swimmer's body illusion basically says that if you swim, you will get a body like the champion swimmers, right?
Ah,
Whereas it's the exact opposite.
correct.
So I think, yeah, that plus the other sort of bias that I remember is this thing called the halo effect, right? Wherein if you have one attractive quality about you, Nitin, you have several, but if you had only one, then you will sort of start associating everything else with that, right? Which is why Sachin Tendulkar or Virat Kohli is able to sell tires, and
Oh,
Sachin
yeah.
Tendulkar is able to sell spinny, right?
Correct.
Because you're sort of thinking about them in those halo terms as god of one thing, and therefore
Correct.
uh, here also, right?
Correct. Which is why South Indian actors become chief ministers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Or not in Kerala, but otherwise in general.
Yeah. True that. All right. Tony.
Hi.
While growing up, I'm sure you remember when we studied about microorganisms, right? I'm going to quickly test you. Can you name the different types of microorganisms?
Wow. Okay. I don't know, like bacteria, virus, like that.
Yeah, yeah. Go on.
Bacteria, virus, protozoa.
Yeah. And what is the fourth? He's forgotten.
Fungi.
Ah, okay. At least Narmada and Tapti, I hope you can mark properly on a map. But no, yeah, well done. It is those four.
Also, what is the powerhouse of the cell?
Mitochondria. Mitochondria. That's why I remember.
See,
Mitochondria.
only thing you remember, the powerhouse of the cell, mitochondria. After that, you've never ever used any of these things.
I have. After 30 years, now I'm listening to podcasts like Andrew Huberman and all these guys. They keep talking about mitochondria, man. Like, now people are like, oh, if you want to cure cancer, you need to, go back and hack your mitochondria back into
Andrew
shape and all.
Hubrisman. So I got 4 out of 4. Yay.
You got 4 out of 4 with a little bit of thinking. You really passed that test with flying colors. Except while preparing for this episode, I was shockingly exposed to a new piece of information that I did not know all these days, that viruses are considered non-living creatures.
What?
Yeah, this now is the modern, just like Pluto is not a planet anymore. Viruses don't conform to a bunch of the basic requirements for what satisfies the requirement for being a living creature, right?
Who
And
needs to be
those,
satisfied?
and that, by the way, is one of them because viruses don't multiply. They don't actually reproduce. They replicate, right? So nobody gets satisfied in the virus family. So there you go. That's actually one of the things. So, so viruses apparently are just bunches of proteins that they're a bit like parasites, right? So they go and they don't have a structure of their own. They go and try and hack into cells or other organisms that become their hosts, and then that becomes the form of that virus, right? So the viruses by themselves don't actually have a physical, physiological form. Like I mentioned, they do not multiply. They, on the other hand, replicate. So when a virus increases in number, they don't actually reproduce the way most living things or all living things do. They don't grow. So viruses don't grow in size. They physiologically don't grow. So there are a bunch of these things
But
that.
does size matter?
Yeah, apparently. The growth, of course, is not just size, but there are other, morphological, physiological ways in which growth can be measured or observed.
Oh, like they become emotionally
Maturity.
stable.
They become better. They become poetic viruses.
Hey, this is true because that is how these viruses become endemic. First, they start out with the hubris that they want to take over the world, destroy all living beings.
Yeah.
But as they grow up and mature, they're like, no, you know what? Maybe we should let everyone live. And I will reduce my ambitions so that I don't take over everything, but I
Yeah.
coexist with.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Perfect.
See,
Perfect.
viruses show sign of growth, man. What do you say?
Also, they don't actually create or use their own energy, right? So this again is goes back to the fact that they are sort of parasites. So they derive their energy from the things from which they take their power. So there are a bunch of these things that people put together to say that viruses actually are not counted as living organisms. When I first saw this on googling today, I thought it is AI hallucinating, and I said, "Ha! I found yet another example of AI giving me complete crap." And then I went and saw like there were multiple websites, reliable websites with this explanation for why viruses actually are not considered living things. But
Interesting.
the reason I brought up viruses, of course, is what we are talking about today is things that continue to happen or exist in spite of being known to be false, right? And this is just a habit amongst a lot of us. So typically, people in general fall ill quite a bit. Flus hit us pretty hard, and flus hit us pretty often, right? It happens to adults, it happens to children all the time now. And typically, when it happens, we don't do anything, right? We sneeze, we cough, we have a bit of a runny nose, a clogged nose, throat, whatever. We wait it out and hope that it'll go away. Maybe pop a couple of crocins, YOLO dolo, which is a solution for a lot of people. But once it goes to 3 or 4 days and these signs don't abate, we go and meet a doctor. The doctor says, "Hey, it looks like a viral only. So, yeah, you just have to rough it out. Maybe take this cough syrup, whatever." And at some point over the next 1 or 2 days, we'll say, "Hey, this is not going away. Let me start antibiotics."
Antibiotics, yeah.
Which is like the stupidest thing to do because a
Correct.
viral flu is not going to react to antibiotics at all. Antibiotics are antibacterials. I think everybody knows this much, but the science or the mechanism through which an antibiotic works is that it literally goes and attacks the structure, the physical structure of a bacteria to inhibit its multiplication, right? Which by definition cannot work on a virus.
Oh, so you're saying an antibiotic is a condom for a bacteria?
Sort of, yeah. Except it is not a self-acting prophylactic, but yeah, it is something that you put on them. But we all do this, right? People say, "Hey, yeah, my viral got really bad and it continued for 5 days, so I started taking antibiotics."
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, hang on. And then they suffer from antibiotics, right? Because antibiotics are fairly brutal on the body also, because they strip your gut lining and they do all kinds of other shit to your body. They make you really weak. And then anyway, the viral, like they said, the difference between a common cold and a severe viral is that one of them you take 7 days to recover, the other one takes a week to recover from.
Yeah.
So yeah, the antibiotics are just popped, and the overall immunity profile of the planet as a whole is reduced a little bit more because, as we know, the more antibiotics we take, the worse we are making it for future generations of human beings who will suffer from these
Because
diseases.
what is it called? Some resistance, something.
I don't know what the exact word is, but yeah, basically these organisms
It
against which
creates super bugs, basically.
yeah, basically
Which
they
will
adapt over time. So the more you take an antibiotic, the more likely that the bacteria that's supposed to get inhibited by it will find a way to adapt around it and mutate into a form that won't get affected by that particular antibiotic.
What happens if you take some probiotics along with antibiotics?
You're supposed to. Because the problem with antibiotics
Gut
is they
health.
don't just kill the good bacteria, bad bacteria, they'll also kill the good bacteria. So the
Right.
reason you take probiotics then is to try and rebuild your gut bacterial lining and all the other good bacteria that you need.
Wait, but this is you're
Yeah.
combining science with pseudoscience. I don't think
No.
probiotics work.
You don't think probiotics work? Oh my god.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, probiotics do work. They're very important things to keep your gut happy and keep the good bacteria flowing in your stomach. Next, you'll tell me gut
Yeah.
bacteria is not a good thing.
No, no. I'm saying like what is sold as probiotics, right? They are not
What is
necessarily
sold?
beneficial.
What is sold as probiotic?
You'll have
Yakult.
those yogurts, yeah, those things, right?
Yeah, those are all very good. They're all very good for your gut bacteria.
Next, we will talk about kefir milk, is it?
Kefir milk works. Okay, please explain to me why do these probiotics not work?
There is no clear evidence that probiotics are beneficial. While many small studies have been conducted, there has been no standardized way to study probiotics and their effects, making it difficult to compare the results of different studies.
Okay, so
Probiotics are not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, which means companies that make probiotics do not need to prove that the product contains the ingredients listed on the bottle.
Wow. So you're not claiming that probiotics are bad. You're claiming that the supplements that are sold as
What is
probiotics,
marketed to you as probiotics are, there is no research on them basically.
that includes kombucha, sauerkraut, kimchi. Interesting. Okay, I never knew about this.
So, Nitin, this brings up the interesting question: are dietary probiotics the same as probiotics in your body?
Yeah, this is actually a good segue to the next topic that I
Correct.
wanted to discuss. Is that
Correct.
where you're going? But no,
Exactly.
I'm still reacting to this. So what the abstract of whatever Tony is beaming up right now is saying that anything that you consume as a probiotic doesn't necessarily have a positive impact on your gut health, because
Well, there have been no standardized studies, right? And
ah,
basically, if you're talking scientific stuff, then it has to be peer reviewed. It has to be studied in terms of
liver doctor
facts.
up yahan.
What liver doctor does is very different. Where he is doing stool transplant and going directly into the gut and putting the bacteria in.
No. I just meant at a conceptual level, this is what liver
There you
doctor
go.
claims, because unless it is
Yeah,
scientifically disproved. Okay, interesting. I didn't know about this.
there you
I
go.
shall.
You learned two new things today. No, Greek yogurt is good, man. I mean, in general, like it's more protein based and stuff like that.
It is, yeah, good for proteins, but also good for probiotics, which you are saying are useless to take. So, what should you do then to improve the quality of your gut health?
We do to
So,
improve.
basically, you are saying there is no way to improve one's gut health. You're born with whatever gut health you have, and that's it. Is it?
No,
Like,
I'm
there's no way
sure
to,
there is some like dietary stuff to it, but it's not
but it's not
proven.
the probiotics.
As in, they are not medical things, right? Basically, I don't think there is any problem in eating like fiber and all of these things. All of these are okay only, but I don't think it necessarily changes the genetic way in which your gut has been configured. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Very good. Yeah, that's how we should discuss scientific topics. Just guess, guess our way out.
See, at this point, I am more accurate than the products out there in the market.
If you want to fix your gut, get a dose of Tony Sebastian. He works better than kefir milk in improving your gut health, is what Tony's saying.
One of the major studies, and I mean, even anecdotally, you know this, that allergies are more common in the Western world than in like developing countries, right? And primarily it is because your
Immunity.
immunity
Yeah,
actually improves in India,
correct.
Africa, etc., because you are exposed to a lot of random crap which your body will anyway fight off. But in
Correct.
the absence of all of this, in the absence of, and in the case of a sanitized environment, sanitized diet, etc., the same immunity that fights against these foreign bodies starts fighting your own body, which is what an allergy is, right? It's
Correct.
basically an autoimmune sort of reaction. So, therefore, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there is a benefit in probiotics, maybe there is not. But I don't think it's been scientifically proven. You don't
Yeah.
have to pound 6 Yakults a day and expect like magical results or benefits.
Yakult anyway is full of added sugar, so you should anyway probably steer clear of it. Stick to good fat-free Greek yogurt. It is the best. Or I
Correct.
mean, even if you don't get any probiotics, at least you're getting good protein and
Shit, now we've become a full tech bro podcast, man. Like,
yeah, through guesswork, which is like the perfect way to be a tech bro podcast. But this much we are clear about and sure about. If you have a viral flu, please don't take antibiotics. They are doing you more harm than good. And they're doing the entire species, the entire civilization of human beings more harm than good. So please think twice before you take any antibiotics. Even if you have a bacterial infection. No, if you have a bacterial infection, please take antibiotics.
yeah.
And
No, I
yeah, don't
think,
be surprised if you find out from your children's textbooks that viruses are not living things. Because, yeah.
well, but they do show signs of emotional maturity and growth. Let's be.
Yeah, with age. But yeah, leading from the point where if you consume probiotics, your gut lining is probably not improving. And it's a very similar sort of concept that we want to talk about. The next thing that we want to discuss, which is dietary cholesterol and its impact on the body's fat percentage or cholesterol in our veins and under our skin. Right. There is, of course, a lot of literature around this, and the prevalent wisdom, say 20, 25 years ago, was that we have to completely shun products or
Fat.
food products that are full of fat, full of cholesterol, whether those are eggs, whether it's meat, red meat, both oils, butter, ghee, etc. The science has changed a bit now as our understanding of fat and how the body stores fat has changed. Largely, what we have found in recent years is that the more sugar we consume, or the more processed grain, wheat, simple carbohydrates that we consume, the more likelihood of actually that getting stored as fat in the body. So you're actually much more likely to do harm to your body by consuming those products than, I wouldn't say an equivalent amount, but an equivalently satiating amount of somewhat fatty food. And a lot of the fat food that we consume, which is, let's say, fish and certain types of oils, nuts, etc., are actually very good for health.
Is
It's
coconut
fun.
oil good or not?
This changes depending on the day of the week, by the way. The science is unclear on this one.
If
Yeah.
you're eating non-veg and drinking alcohol, then is coconut oil good?
Then it is probably the healthiest part of your diet, so it is good. So yeah, there you go. Yeah,
So this
but
is actually like a segue from the last topic. Is basically coconut oil is in fact called the Malu penicillin, right? And penicillin is
to
obviously the first broad
antibiotic.
spectrum antibiotic because we
Yeah,
use coconut oil for everything from,
yeah.
I don't know, lubrication to hair to dietary consumption to and beyond, right? To telling
I
if
find it
winter is
interesting that
here.
lubrication was the first example you had to point out. Like, essential oil.
Essential oil, yeah.
The taste
This
of
is the
coconut oil.
reason
Yeah.
why biologically tropical fertility is high, right? Because you can use coconut oil for lubrication.
Tropical fertility. The words I never thought I'll hear said together. Oh yeah. But the
See,
fundamental part
you
of
can show tropics as less in size in your Mercator projection, but the
Hmm.
truth is always that we are bigger than you think you are
Oh,
and more fertile.
we are bigger than you think you are, or you think we are. What? It's very important to know
Both.
what both, all of them. Long story short, dietary cholesterol and visceral cholesterol or body cholesterol aren't directly correlated. Maybe like Tony is talking about good
Oh,
bacteria.
now you are doing the guesswork.
Maybe.
I love it.
Maybe. This used to be a fun podcast between two people cracking random jokes, and now it is all. Maybe this is how we'll become famous.
Full
Huh? Never
cameos.
Doctor is going to take this podcast down, and that's how we are going to get our
Oh
listeners. These
yeah,
two
isn't it?
fools,
Isn't it?
these two educated fools, are saying all kinds of rubbish, and they're invoking my good name for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
Revant Himatsiga, or that food farmer guy, he will also come
yeah.
and maybe debunk our podcast. Guys, please listen to this podcast, debunk it. We want listeners, right? We want to stir up a controversy.
Yeah, this is what leads to popularity of things like keto diet, etc. Right? But I think largely one thing is for sure that your calorific value of fats are much larger, right? And even if you have that basic sort of thing, you know the formula of how it is calculated, right?
Yeah.
E, it's 449. So
E equals MC
carbs is
square. Yeah, I know. No, but
not
the thing
that
is
one.
this, right? The thing with fats is
One
it's
second.
actually.
One gram
Ah,
carb is 4. 1 gram protein is 4. 1 gram fat is 9. Right.
correct.
Which means obviously, like,
Yes, but have you ever tried taking a cup of ghee and eating it up?
no
The way you
way.
might. Because you cannot. There's nobody who can eat it. You can't eat fat by itself, right? Humanly, it's not
Okay.
possible. You'll just, it
This
is
is why.
repulsive. Yeah.
But didn't Lord Krishna do this, or what was that butter?
Only gods can do it. So,
Please
yeah, there you
clarify.
go. Yo. The only way you can consume fat is by mixing it with carbohydrates or with proteins, right? And
Okay.
whereas you can eat carbohydrates by themselves, right? There's almost nothing like. I mean, we love our processed,
So
refined breads,
from
which
junk
are
mail to junk food, we have come here.
come this where we are now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so see, the nature of each food group is that protein is again something you cannot actually consume in great quantities because it creates satisfaction and satiety, right? So you actually satiety, I don't know how you actually pronounce this. You only read them, you never hear them. I'll say satiety.
Mercator.
Mercator satiety is where it's at. Yeah. So protein is good because the more protein you eat, the less hungry you become. So you will actually be happy after consuming a certain quantity of protein. Carbohydrates do the exact opposite, right? They actually spur you to eat more, especially if they're mixed with sugars, and which again are a different form of carbohydrates, and salt and fat. All of that together just makes it tastier. which is why no one can eat just one after you open a packet of Ruffles Lace, right? Or Lace.
Yeah.
I just gave away my age by calling it Ruffles Lace. To me, it will always be Ruffles Lace. Yeah.
No, it's that only. Ruffles lace, Ruffles
एक
lace.
बार खाओगे
एक
तो
बार
खाते
खाओगे तो
नहीं
खाते
जाओगे.
रह जाओगे.
No one
खाते
can
रह
eat.
जाओगे.
हाँ, खाते रह जाओगे. Sorry. Yeah. No one can eat just one. And
Ding dong.
fats, like I said, yeah, fats you cannot actually eat by themselves because it is not possible. It's always an addendum. So it doesn't make
You
sense
have
to
a
look at
chip
the
on your
gram to
shoulder.
gram. So it doesn't
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sense to look
Anyway,
at
I
the
mean,
gram
I don't know
equivalent. Yeah.
why are we getting into all this.
But
Cool.
but it's funny that even now people who know all of this will still say, "Hey, I don't eat eggs because cholesterol." I'm like, yeah. So what? Firstly, it has very
Oh,
little.
no. I think the
Yeah.
best depiction of this is how those gym bros would leave behind egg yolks in the
Yeah.
plate, right? Like
Yeah, because
take
it
like
has fat.
6 eggs and just eat the whites and leave
No,
behind
actually,
the yolk.
while it's silly, at least the gym bros have a logic for why they're doing it because they are trying to sculpt their body with. They're trying to completely strip off, every last bit of fat they can from their body. If you're operating at that level, I mean, there are gym bros who before a photo shoot will not drink water because
Huh.
that's when you see the definition of the muscles well, right? So if that is where you're operating, then sure.
There
I
are
mean,
also gym bros who will wear 2 different shoes on their feet.
yeah.
But
It's called having your egg and eating it too. But yeah. Overall, please feel free to eat everything you do. Just
what
don't.
the fuck? I don't understand why you're giving gad like feel
I don't know.
free
Yeah,
to.
what are we supposed to do? Yeah, it's just. I just find funny when people say, "Oh, I don't eat this because it is high on cholesterol. So let me instead eat something simple tonight because I don't want to tax my body. I'm going to have a simple meal. What is that simple meal? I'm going to eat 4 idlis in the night, which is like pure simple carbohydrates straight into the bloodstream. I'm like, yeah, sure. Have fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let people eat what they want. Anyway, so moving on to the next one. This is basically all standardized testing is bullshit, right? Whether it's an IQ test or SAT or any of these. There's
Yeah.
one that is still prevalent, especially in corporate culture, as a measure of what they call psychometric analysis, etc., which is complete pseudoscience and bullshit. Right?
Yeah.
50 million people have taken this test. 10,000 businesses, 2,500 colleges and universities, and 200 government agencies in the United States still use this. It is called the Myers-Briggs test indicator.
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs
MBTI.
type indicator. Yeah,
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is nothing but absolute garbage, right? It is
Yeah.
complete pseudoscience.
Yeah.
And yeah, tell me, what are you? ENTJ.
ENTP. I've forgotten whatever I was. Yeah.
What are you? Libra. They have about the same level of validity, basically.
So yeah, the MBTI. Firstly, I think we should mention like a few days back in a different context, we were talking about four-letter abbreviations, right, and how they
Oh,
are popular.
yeah.
C
Correct.
for BR, Tala for a reason, T for AR, and now you have
PTSD,
MBTI,
BDSM.
all of these exactly. Oh, we
Yeah,
spoke on this podcast only, correct. And then
correct.
you now have MBTI, which is also 4 letters. But the interesting part is the framework, all the different personality types that it churns out are also 4 letter acronyms, right? So you have INTJ, ENTP, whatever, right?
Correct. Yeah.
If you remember when Facebook really became very famous and people started launching these quizzes on Facebook, right? Everyone would create a quiz on Facebook and you could play a game and you would get some what color are you? What spirit animal is your animal? These kinds of quizzes. Do you remember back in I think
Yeah, of
roughly 10
course.
years back? Yeah.
When
MBTI was
Farmville and Farmville
yeah,
used to be a thing, and what was the other one? Some gang wars or something. I forgot. Mafia
yeah.
wars.
Mafia wars. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Those were the days, my friends.
Yeah. The reason MBTI I think was popular was it is actually that same concept. It is like a Facebook quiz, except it existed in the world before Facebook. So there were no other games for people to play. Right? There was just this one quiz.
Yeah.
Hey, what is your score? Hey, what is yours? Everyone gets something, right? And there's no correct or wrong answer. Everyone is something, and it's all fun at the end of the day. It's like Sun Science, right? Everyone is a
Correct.
winner. It's one of those slot machine type situations. And I think yeah,
Correct.
MBTI just got picked up by certain supposedly intellectual types. I know that I think
Exactly.
every McKinsey hire, for instance, is made to take the
Yeah.
MBTI. I don't know if they still are. And
Correct.
they'll then keep talking, and they'll put it on their LinkedIn profile and the CV and all that. I am an INTJ. Like, fuck off! I don't even know what that means. Like, who cares what?
You're a Libra
Yeah,
only, no? I'm a Taurus.
yeah. So
Was also born in the year of the rabbit. No, these have about the same effects, except one is considered
Broadly.
in
Yeah.
the corporate sphere to be more important than the other. All of which is bunkum, but
Yeah.
actually this effect is called the Barnum effect, right?
Oh,
And it
I
is
thought it's the
named after this
Bankam Chandra Chatterjee effect.
bunkum.
But
It is named after this guy called P.T. Barnum, the
ah,
greatest showman on earth, right?
yeah.
Basically, he also promoted a bunch of hoaxes, right?
Ah,
But
okay.
actually, the guy who invented this was called Forer, right? And I vaguely remember there was this thing on Twitter where someone said the person finding the effect and the person naming the effect are usually different, and like the second guy gets more credit or something like
Hmm.
that. And it was a like banger of a tweet, and then a second guy came. Let us say the first guy was Tony and the second guy is Nitin, and the second guy said this effect shall hereforth be referred to as the Nitin effect, which
Yeah.
actually got more likes than the original one, therefore proving the
Correct.
point. Right? So
Yeah.
the Barnum effect was discovered by Forer, right? And
Ah,
what essentially is that there are Barnum statements which can be generally true of people, which is how
hmm.
fortune tellers, astrologers, etc. operate.
Yeah.
And people tend to like it because it is broadly true for them, right? So
Correct.
how this guy went about doing it is that this psychologist called Ross Stagner asked a number of people to take a personality test. After they took the test, he quietly took all the papers and put it aside
Hmm.
and gave all of them a assessment of their personality, which went to 13 points, right? So
Yeah.
they used to be like, you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. You have a
Correct.
tendency to be critical of yourself. You
Correct.
have a great deal of unused capacity, which you have not turned to your advantage, etc., etc. Right? While you have some personality weaknesses, you are generally able to compensate for them. Blah blah. Right? Some of these things. Basically, then he asked the students to look at these results and rate on a scale of 0 to 5 as to what
Yeah.
they
How
thought its
accurate it
accuracy
is.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, the results came out to 4.3. Right.
Of course.
So basically, this is the Barnum effect, where you put
Yeah.
in a number of random things, and people generally sort of buy into it because they're gullible. Because obviously, you also want to lead with hope, right? You want to believe in
Correct.
something. It is also called the Pollyanna principle, right? Pollyanna is generally a cheery, happy person, where individuals tend to accept positive words of feedback more
Ah,
frequently than negative words of feedback, right?
correct.
Unlike this podcast, which gets no feedback. No,
No,
but
no
yeah,
feedback is good feedback. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's end of the day, it's all positive, right? I mean, everyone is a winner. Everyone gets a. It's like the return gifts that you get when you go to a party, or these
correct,
participation certificates that kids get these
correct,
days, right? Everyone gets a medal. Everyone's a winner. What's not to like,
correct.
right? At the end of the day, you feel that you've got some deep insight into your own personality, and you feel
Correct.
special when somebody gives you a 13-point breakdown of your
Yeah.
personality. You feel special somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all rubbish.
So
MBTI is
basically,
rubbish.
again,
Yeah.
the point being this test efficiencies like poor validity, poor reliability. This one's clearly bunkum, right? And
Yeah.
interestingly, to tie it back to our initial intro when we spoke about junk mail, this MBTI was actually inspired by Carl
Carl Jung.
Jung's 1920. Yeah, Carl Jung, if you want to
Carl
call
Jung.
it.
Hmm.
Carl Jung's 1921 book called Psychological Types, right? But it's absolute bullshit.
Yes. MBTI down down.
So this is also why you tend to accept the intros written about you, right?
Yeah. I don't. I'm just hoping you won't say something embarrassing or more embarrassing than you have in the past when you're giving me
Yeah,
your intros.
correct.
Okay. Moving on to the next thing that doesn't work but continues to get used widely. Right. Honking
MS
on Indian.
Dhoni.
Yeah. Honking on Indian roads. Do you honk, Tony? Are you a honker?
No, I am
No.
not a honker.
You actually don't honk.
Except in the instances of pure road rage, I generally don't honk. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Some ways,
rarely.
you know how much it gets used.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
No,
does it
but there
say?
was this
Yeah.
recent innovation from our transport minister, Nitin Gadkari,
Oh,
who
yeah,
said
yeah,
we will
yeah.
replace
Yeah.
All the horns with Indian
Indian
musical
Carnatic
instruments.
Indian Carnatic musical instruments or classical
Oh
musical
man.
instruments.
But speaking of these horns, right? There is the worst one is the one which are
The air
these
horn.
weird Bangalore buses, right?
Uh,
Not the official KSRTC ones, the
yeah,
colorful
the
ones,
private
which are
buses.
full of
Yeah,
LED lights. Oh my god.
yeah. There was
Absolute
one
nonsense.
video a few months back, no, where a cop actually stopped one of those buses, pulled the driver out, and made the driver come and stand in front of the bus, and
And
got someone to
honk.
honk into his ear. Thing is, the cop is also standing right there. So, yeah, sure, this guy is getting 100% of the ear damage, but the cop is also getting like 95% of the ear damage. But he seems happy. Like people take out their pent up irritations in various ways, right? And one of them involves a cop actually standing and enduring that noise while punishing the
Yeah.
driver by making him stand
Yeah.
up. I live in Dubai, where we don't honk in general. Like in most parts of the world, people don't honk. The only
Honking
time
company.
people honk is, if you're at a signal or something and it's turned green, and the person in front of you, you've given him 5 seconds and he's still not moved. And, let's say it's open in front of him. He's probably looking at his phone or he's fallen asleep
Yeah.
or something. It's okay to honk when that happens, right? Or if someone cuts you off, this jumping lanes without an indicator, and you just want to express your irritation with that person, or you're worried that they might actually swerve and hit you, or they're going into a different lane doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. It's more like a caution. If they're not looking at something you think they should be looking at, and then you sort of honk. But other than that, nobody honks, right? And generally, people who have come to Dubai from other parts of the world, not India, claim that Dubai is one of the most aggressive, has one of the most aggressive road cultures that they've experienced. They find it very tough to drive in Dubai. And I'm like, wow, this
It's
place is
because
such a
it's full
joy
of
to drive.
Malayalis.
I find that driving is like, it's so peaceful and therapeutic. Like things are so predictable. You're always in your lane. You people are not honking at you. Nobody honks. You don't have to.
In
And
your
you're flying.
lane, Moy. So, for recent listeners of Leftover Lasagna, we must clarify that honk is the short form of Mohan Krishnamurti.
Yeah. Mohonk. He has a big horn on his cycle. He goes pam 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 pam.
You know what that is, no? It's the IPL horn.
Yeah.
On that note, we shall bring about the end of yet another episode of Leftover Lasagna.
Yeah.
Uh,
This episode was about things that are unnecessary and unwanted, but continue to be used. Continue to exist.
on that opposite note,
Uh,
please, thank you for listening in. Wait for us in the next episode, which will be soon. Sooner
Yeah.
than the last one was, hopefully.
Sooner than the last one was. Like, even Christopher Nolan won't understand what you're trying to say.
It's okay. Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's
We
okay.
shall bend the space-time continuum for you.
Before we sign off, to channel our favorite podcast, which we keep talking about, which is Everything is Everything. At the end of Everything is Everything, the panel is Ajay Shah, about to say Amit Shah again. Ajay Shah and Amit Verma both give recommendations of other content to consume. So, in that style, I would like to recommend this podcast that I discovered recently. It's by this person called Palash Kulkarni, who we have spoken about on this
The
podcast in one
big
of the earlier episodes.
splash.
At the Bigger Spalash, I think. Yeah, at the Bigger Spalash. The name of this podcast is All Risk is Creative. And I highly recommend it. It's a nice podcast. It's only 4 episodes old. There's one episode on PV Narasimha Rao and there's one episode on Christopher Nolan, both of which I've listened to and enjoyed. So yeah, shout out to Palash and to his podcast. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and the definitive one and only thing that you need to know about ADHD has dropped on
Oh
Trevor
yeah.
Noah's podcast, which is What
Hmm.
Now, is superb, absolutely superb episode. As a person who is pretty sure that I have ADHD
Why don't you
and a
actually go to a
co-host who
doctor? Why don't you actually go to a doctor and
I'll explain exactly why. Because it doesn't change anything, right? So here is like what once let me explain to you. If I have ADHD and I am acting in manners that are interventions for the said thing while being knowledgeable about it, that
oh,
is
you're taking
already the only thing you
antibiotics?
can do. That is already the only thing you can do, right? As long as you don't want to get on medication or whatever, the diagnosis doesn't do anything, because if I know that I have it and I act in ways to sort of minimize the effect, whether it is interventions or being kinder to myself or understanding myself better, that is good enough, right? And it doesn't, you don't need a certification saying you're ADHD, right? Like, I'm not going to claim seat on the bus because I have ADHD, right? It is a better way of sort of understanding yourself and dealing with a world that was not made for ADHD people. That's all. But this episode, I think, is important because whether you have it or your friends have it or your partner has it or your kids have it, it's a beautiful explainer. He
Oh,
does
you're talking
a
about Trevor Noah's
tremendous
episode.
job.
I thought you were talking about this episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a good episode. Yes, I
Yeah.
listened to it before Tony did, so I was able to quote
At
jokes from
27
it.
minutes before.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, the title is Neurospicy Discussing ADHD with Dr. Kristin Karathas. So, because
Enjoy.
Trevor Noah doesn't have episode numbers like us, we have to do all this. What is
Correct.
nonsense podcast that don't do episode numbers, man? At
Correct.
least we are doing one thing correct.
Yeah, that's also not correct because we have the number issue. But
It's okay.
sure.
On that note, we shall sign off. Say bye.
Yes, thank you so much. Stay subscribed. Bye bye.